Hey there, picture a late May night in 2006, right outside one of Britain's most secure cash depots. A facility everyone believed was totally impenetrable, but inside, pure, surreal chaos. A wildly brazen heist was going down. 7 thieves strolled around, desperately tossing heavy crates of cash right into their getaway rides. They just pulled off a jaw-dropping robbery. It was ruthless, violent, and netted the absolute largest pile of stolen cash in British history. But here's the crazy part. By the end, the money was just too bulky to jam into their packed cars. They actually had to leave behind a mind-blowing 154 million pounds. That equals roughly 4,620 billion Vietnamese dong. At first glance, the robbery looked like a total triumph, but this massive fortune ended up being a twisted curse. It totally destroyed the remaining lives of every single thief who took part. It became a deadly trap. So what really went down on that fateful night? Stick with me here. Let's rewind the clock and jump straight back to 2006 to uncover the real story behind this world-famous depot heist. Tonbridge is a quiet, ancient town tucked away in Kent, England, boasting a rich history, stretching all the way back to the Middle Ages. But in 1980, this sleepy spot got a major upgrade. Barclays Bank decided to build a gigantic cash storage facility here. It was a massive compound built just to safely hold and move mountains of physical paper money. Jump ahead to 2001. That vault was handed straight over to a branch of a major global security firm to run things. The depot had about 80 employees, working around the clock in 3 shifts. Their daily routine was simple yet highly sensitive: sorting, counting, and stacking bills. The mind-blowing robbery we are unpacking today happened right behind these exact reinforced walls. Back in the late 90s, the UK got hit by a huge crime wave. Street violence spiked wildly, with muggings and burglaries happening non-stop. And as you might guess, a depot packed to the ceiling with fresh bills stood out like a sore thumb. Local criminals basically viewed it as one gigantic free ATM. The security firm obviously knew the risks perfectly well, so they dialed their defense protocols up to 11. We are talking heavy-duty stuff: multi-tier access checkpoints and relentless 24/7 camera feeds, secret employee passcodes, and hardcore emergency drills. The whole place was armed to the teeth. But despite all those heavy security layers, the single most important defense was the branch manager, Mr. Colin Dixon. The firm put brutally strict rules on his shoulders. For example, he protected those depot keys with his life. He could never talk about his job with his wife, and he absolutely could not let any co-workers know where he lived. He actually had to drive random, changing routes to work every single morning. He even swapped out the family cars on rotation. Management went so far as to mandate that if cops ever pulled him over during his morning commute, he had to stay completely inside his car. He was supposed to clearly state his name and then drive directly to the nearest police station himself. On paper at least, if he stuck to these rules, the cash vault was entirely bulletproof. But we are all human, right? After a while, routine makes you a little too comfortable. And that split second of slipped focus gave the gang their golden ticket. Let's jump to the evening of May 21st, 2006. Right around 6:30 p.m., Colin finally clocked out and drove home alone, just like he always did. On the road, an unmarked Volvo S60 flipped on a set of flashing blue emergency lights and signaled him to pull over. 2 guys wearing police caps and high-vis jackets walked right up to his window. Deadpan, they said, "You were speeding, sir. Step out of your car immediately and work with us." In that stressful moment, Colin completely forgot the company's strict safety rules. He killed the engine, got out on the shoulder, and climbed right into the back of their squad car. But the second he sat down, snap, handcuffs locked onto his wrists, and they violently dragged him into a waiting white van. Sitting there in total terror, the dark reality finally hit him. He was a hostage. The crew sped off toward Warren Farm and kept him completely tied down. But the nightmare was just getting started, because Colin was never the only target on their list. Later that night, his wife Lynn was quietly cooking dinner in their kitchen. Suddenly, a heavy knock hammered at the front door. She figured her husband was finally home, but when she opened the front door, 2 cops were standing on the porch. They delivered the news fast. They said Colin had been in a massive car wreck on the highway, and things weren't looking good. He was in critical condition. They told her to grab the kids and rush to the hospital right away. Lynn was frozen with fear. Her legs felt like lead, and she barely had a second to process anything. She just hurried her children into the back of the cruiser, and honestly, you can probably guess where this is going. Those cops? Just thieves, wearing fake uniforms. Lynn and her kids were driven straight out to Warden Farm. Just like that, the whole family was trapped by the crime ring. Later that night, outside the dark farmhouse, a brutal winter storm was dumping snow. Colin, his face bruised and bleeding, was backed into a corner by the armed crew. They shoved guns in his face, demanding every single detail about the depot layout and the security system protecting the cash vault. The thieves were dead serious and brutally clear. If you don't tell us everything, your wife and kids won't live to see tomorrow. Colin was out of options. He had to play along. At 1 a.m, the robbers marched Colin and his family outside, splitting them up into 3 separate getaway cars. They drove straight toward the security depot. By 1:21 in the morning, the vehicles idled outside the gates, trying to keep a low profile. Most of the crew hung back in the cars. Colin was roughly pushed out of his seat by a guy wearing that fake police uniform. He dragged his feet to the pedestrian entrance and buzzed the intercom. Through the thick glass, he locked eyes with the operator, sitting inside the control room, silently begging him to notice something was wrong. But the guy on the other side was completely clueless. He didn't even ask why his boss was showing up in the middle of the night with a cop. He just buzzed them right through. Once they breached the control room, Colin had to open the main security gates. Seconds later, the 3 vehicles rolled right into the inner courtyard. Right on cue, 6 more masked men swarmed the building. They were armed to the teeth, rushing in with a crazy mix of pistols, shotguns, and heavy assault rifles. One guy was even packing an Uzi. They were screaming and smashing things. The night shift staff panicked, scattering everywhere just trying to survive. A couple of them tried to fight back, but staring down a shotgun barrel ends that pretty fast. The room went dead still. Eventually, all 14 workers in the building were rounded up as hostages under the security cameras. Then, sticking right to the heist plan, the crew started rolling out these huge metal cages, packed to the ceiling with shrink-wrapped cash. Here's the problem, though. Those bank cages weighed hundreds of pounds each. You could barely push them by hand. So one of the gunmen yelled at a depot worker, forcing him onto a forklift to load the pallets of money. But this guy was smart. He acted terrified and followed orders while quietly sabotaging the forklift controls right under their noses. He intentionally drove the machine right into a tight spot by the loading dock, wedging it so deep it was completely stuck in place. Meanwhile, Colin was pulling his own tricks, fumbling with keys and stalling for every single second he could get as the clock kept ticking down on the robbery. The thieves started losing their minds. They totally snapped, grabbing all the hostages and locking them inside the empty cash cages in the security room. After that, they just hauled the cash by hand. For a solid hour, all 7 men were sprinting back and forth in front of the cameras, sweating through their clothes. When it was over, they had emptied 17 metal cages and 3 transport trolleys, all bursting with banknotes. But since most of those bills were smaller bills, the massive haul weighed several tons. They had to pack all 3 getaway vans straight up to the roof. Even with a mountain of money still sitting in the open vault, they physically couldn't take another dime. There just wasn't a single inch of room left in those vehicles. They had to eat their greed and walk away. At 2:44 in the morning, the heist crew drove off, vanishing entirely into the heavy winter storm. But right before speeding off, they yelled one last warning at the hostages: don't try anything heroic. So everyone stayed completely frozen until 3:15 in the morning. Once they were absolutely sure the yard outside was dead quiet, the trapped workers finally tried to escape. Thankfully, Colin's youngest kid was small enough to literally squeeze through the tight metal bars of the money cage. The boy managed to reach an employee who had secretly stashed a spare key. They popped the locks, smashed the panic button, and finally ended the nightmare. The second that alarm triggered, heavily armed real police swarmed the depot, locking down the massive crime scene in minutes. Amazingly, the crew completely forgot to steal the hard drives, so the entire robbery was caught on high-definition video. Detectives scrubbed the surveillance footage frame by frame, confirming a total of 7 different men working the heist. But they were all covered up so well that facial recognition was completely out of the question. To keep things straight for the criminal investigation, detectives assigned every suspect a street name. The guy wearing the fake cop outfit all night, the one busy managing. The hostages in the back room, they just labeled him the cop. Then there was the guy constantly staring at his wrist to check the time. He was clearly the boss running the whole operation, so they dubbed him Stopwatch. The rest of the armed gang got hit with pretty simple nicknames too, like Shorty, Hoodie, and Mr. Average. But as investigators stared at those screens for hours, they finally noticed something huge. A handful of really bizarre details stood out. Some of these guys had a totally weird, unnatural stiffness to their jaws. The way they moved their heads was incredibly stiff and robotic. Their expressions were flat-out dead, like they were actually wearing movie-grade silicone masks under the ski masks. These guys went to insane lengths to hide their identities. Makes sense why they had the nerve to work right under the security cameras. You couldn't even make out their faces anyway. But those cameras did manage to grab footage of the 3 getaway vehicles, including a 7.5-ton white Renault truck, a Vauxhall sedan, and a Volvo S60. Crime scene investigators also managed to pull several shoe prints from the depot, fingerprints, and DNA swabs. Meanwhile, Colin sat down with detectives and walked them through the entire terrifying nightmare, explaining how he and his family were abducted straight to the cops. He put serious focus on the physical traits of a specific white kidnapper. The guy was super skinny, standing somewhere around 1.83 to 1.88 meters tall, probably mid-40s to early 50s, with a long, narrow nose, thin lips, and a really sharp, square jaw, plus brown hair, and a dark brown goatee. Colin also noticed something weird when they talked. The suspect's facial expressions were completely rigid, like his face was literally frozen in place. While detectives were scrambling to hunt down clues, depot management finally finished tallying up the massive losses, confirming the worst. This crew just vanished with a mind-blowing £53 million, which equals around 1,590 billion dong. This insane cash grab included both worn banknotes already in circulation and fresh, totally uncirculated new bills, mostly stacked in 10s, 20s, and 50-pound notes. Before this crazy heist happened, the biggest cash robbery in UK history was the Northern Bank job over in Belfast back in 2004, where they snatched around £26.5 million, or roughly $795 billion dong. But this Tonbridge vault robbery literally doubled that old record, easily claiming the top spot as the biggest cash heist in the entire history of the UK. One wild detail worth pointing out is that inside the vault, there was actually around £154 million left untouched. That is roughly 4,620 billion dong. So, yeah, it was basically a massive stroke of luck during a total nightmare, mainly because that cash belonged straight to the Bank of England. The security company had to hand over a quick £25 million to the bank right away, which is about 750 billion dong, plus they promised to eat the entire remaining loss. The security firm, teaming up with their insurance guys, dropped a huge reward poster. Anyone offering solid tips or information that helped crack the robbery case would score a crazy £2 million, or around 60 billion dong. The second this hit the press, huge media outlets everywhere in the country swarmed the story instantly, blasting almost identical headlines. 7 armed thieves team up to successfully raid a security depot, running off with an absolute fortune while cops offer £2 million for the suspects. Even Crime Stoppers, an independent British charity that handles anonymous crime tips, publicly confirmed this was the largest single reward ever put on the table in UK history. Lured in by that crazy amount of cash, detectives were absolutely hammered with endless tips, chasing down these leads. The police moved fast and ended up arresting dozens of suspects. That swept up totally innocent folks who were just in the wrong place. Along with the guys actually running the Tonbridge heist, there was just an enormous list of names. We are not going to break down every single person here, just going to look at the major players. The first suspect that really grabbed the cops' attention was a woman named Michelle. She was a genuinely stunning hairdresser. Right before the vault robbery happened, she bought a ton of theatrical makeup gear, like fake prosthetics, liquid latex, and dark hair dye totaling £400 at a super popular stage supply shop out in London. Since she walked out with such a huge stash, the shop owner remembered her clearly. But the real red flag was Michelle's true identity. Turns out she was the daughter of Jafra, a retired London police officer. The exact minute that detail came to light, the whole investigation into the heist got significantly more messy. Was it actually possible this multi-million-pound robbery was a dirty inside job tied to the police? With those massive red flags waving, detectives hunted down Michelle, but the second she locked eyes with the police, she just lost it. Crying hysterically and swearing up and down she was completely clueless. She just kept begging, "I cannot say anything else. If I spill even one more detail, my entire family is dead." I mean, let's be real. Isn't that basically a giant flashing confession sign? Making things even worse, the cops dug through her trash and turned up a huge pile of used latex, wigs, and empty hair dye boxes. This mountain of physical proof, combined with Michelle absolutely losing her mind, was more than enough for them. She was totally guilty of helping the crew. They dragged her right into the station for serious questioning. Meanwhile, investigators also managed to locate a few of the getaway vehicles, parked right outside a pub named The Hook and Tucker. Out around Maidstone, they found a dumped express delivery van, and after checking the plates, they figured out it was one of the literal vehicles the gang used to snatch Colin and his family. And near Leeds Castle, the cops located the Volvo S60, along with the Vauxhall sedan caught on the security footage. The Volvo was completely gutted by fire, torched to destroy the evidence. Sitting in the lot of a pub called the Bonin, out in the town of Detling, detectives finally tracked down the Nissan, the exact same car Colin drove home the night this whole nightmare kicked off. Detectives traced the origins and escape routes of the getaway vehicles. Soon enough, they locked onto a key suspect. Roy, a used car salesman. He constantly bragged about serving in the submarine special forces, spinning all kinds of crazy stories. He sold these fake military tales so well, and even did favors for people. But the truth? The guy had zero combat background. He was just a known local scam artist, and for a guy carrying a rap sheet that long, detectives felt pretty certain he was tied to the bank heist. Then, on the 24th, officers flagged down another suspicious white panel van. It was not the Renault truck from the security tapes, but the back of this vehicle held a goldmine of evidence. A ski mask, a bulletproof vest, an Uzi submachine gun, and over 1.3 million British pounds, which equals out to around 39 billion dong in stolen cash. Running the plates on that van pointed police straight to two more suspects, Lee and Zmir. On paper, Lee worked as a regular mechanic, but his real day job? He was actually a pro mixed martial arts fighter. He ran mixed martial arts classes at a gym right near the targeted cash vault, and that is exactly where he bumped into Zmir, a nightclub bouncer. Zmir played the tough security guard by day, but by night he was secretly smuggling illegal goods. The crazy thing is, he actually came from a pretty solid family. His dad was an engineer, his mom taught school. The guy really should have had a totally bright future ahead of him. But after leaving his home country for the UK, things went off the rails. He slowly drifted, eventually sinking right into organized crime. On top of that, detectives found out Zmir already had ties to Roy, our fake submarine veteran from earlier. These seemingly random connections between the men, as the investigation deepened, they slowly locked together to form a clear criminal syndicate. On the 24th, police stumbled on 14 identical metal crates that the robbers dumped at a local farm. This meant the crew had already chopped up the literal tons of cash, hiding it across multiple scattered stash houses. The very next day, SWAT teams moved in, kicking in the doors at Zmir and Lee's homes. They seized a mountain of evidence: receipts for theatrical makeup, fake police car decals, rough hand-drawn blueprints showing the vault interior, the getaway ski masks, a police scanner, and Royal Mail postal uniforms, multiple firearms, and a step-by-step heist plan. The sheer amount of evidence was impossible to deny. It proved beyond any shadow of a doubt that Lee and his crew pulled this off. An intense manhunt kicked off right away. By the afternoon of the 26th, cops grabbed Roy on Tankerton Avenue. The very next day, both Lee and Zmir were swept up in the dragnet, one by one. With 3 heavy hitters locked up, the grand design of this whole heist was finally making sense. By the 28th, investigators tracked down that white Renault truck they had seen. On the original security footage, the registered owner, Roy, the fraud they already had sitting in a cell. Now, where did all that dirty money go? Detectives figured the crew just did not have enough time to perfectly divide the massive haul. All that stolen cash had to be broken into huge chunks and hidden at a drop spot. So, they launched a massive search of War Farm, the exact property where Colin and his family were first taken hostage. Sure enough, they hit pay dirt. While the recovered cash pile wasn't huge, only around 135,600 British pounds, but it was enough to prove this farm was a transit point for the dirty money. The farm owner, Z, shot right to the top of the suspect list and was cuffed immediately. Then, early that next month, officers hit a warehouse out in Wing's Industrial Zone C. Inside, they scooped up 9.6 million pounds in cold, hard cash. It was the single biggest chunk of stolen bank money recovered since the heist went down. A truck dealer named Roger was renting the place. Detectives matched his DNA straight to the zip ties used on the terrified vault workers. At this stage, the forensic proof was bulletproof. Roger was quickly locked up too. Shortly after, a tip led police straight to a dirty garage rented by Lee's own cousin. Cops struck gold again, uncovering another £8.6 million to finally choke off the syndicate and keep the cash from leaving the country. Officers threw up hard checkpoints across every single major highway. The roadblock strategy worked. A businessman named Ian got pulled over on the interstate, hauling almost £1 million of raw cash in his trunk. Police confirmed 380,000 of it was dirty money from the depot robbery. Turns out, Ian had been washing illegal funds for organized crime rings for a long time. The guy completely refused to name his source. Ultimately, a judge handed him 3 years and 9 months behind bars for hiding illegal assets. Around that same time, detectives also managed to grab a street thug named Britt. He was the exact guy who helped paint those fake police decals onto the getaway vans, and then walked away with a £6,000 payout. After months of grueling searches, Kent police managed to recover roughly £21 million of the stolen cash. Even with major breakthroughs in the case, one massive problem remained. 7 robbers in total had raided the cash depot during the heist. Yet so far, only 4 ringleaders were in custody. They were obviously missing a few. To hunt down the rest of the crew, still on the run, detectives dug deep into the phone logs and bank records of the guys already locked up, tracing locations and turning up the heat on interrogations. Finally, they found out that on May 6, 2006, Roger, Roy, and Lee held a secret sit-down. At that meeting were 2 other shady guys, Murray and Paul. The second those 2 names surfaced, the entire investigation squad went on high alert. The cops knew them way too well. Murray was of British-Moroccan descent. He also used to be a mixed martial artist, a pro fighter. He was a tight associate of Lee, built like an absolute tank, with a nasty temper. He was notoriously arrogant, went by the nickname Flash, and had a terrifying rap sheet. He had been running the criminal underworld since his teens. Theft, drug trafficking, violent brawls. He was even a murder suspect at one point. His criminal record was thick enough to make anyone shudder, a notoriously dangerous guy who stayed on the police radar. Paul was his hometown buddy and completely inseparable right-hand man. He had provided behind-the-scenes backup for years. Over time, Murray became a notorious figure in both the criminal underworld and legitimate business circles of southeast London. Almost everyone knew his name. He even had this famously arrogant catchphrase. Some folks might call me a bully, but to me, a bully is a guy who picks on weak people who cannot fight back. I just bully everybody. Having such an extremely dangerous guy tied to this heist put cops under massive pressure. The shady network backing him up was enough to double the difficulty of the entire investigation. Combined with Murray and his street smarts, the police had a very strong hunch. Murray was likely the real mastermind behind this massive heist. The investigation that followed proved them dead right. After some careful digging, the cops confirmed the robber. Nicknamed Stopwatch, in the security footage of the robbery, the guy calmly calling the shots was Murray. He was the one who pulled Mel into the job, handing over all the disguise gear. Michelle later flipped and pointed him out to the cops as the real mastermind. Interestingly, a few days before the heist, Murray had actually slipped onto the police radar totally by accident. After a wild night at a London club, the very next morning, he completely wrecked his yellow Ferrari. Right at the crash scene, cops discovered 2 burner phones, One of them held a saved text conversation between him and Lee, hashing out all the details of the heist. On top of that, there was contact info for the whole crew, plus 3 group photos taken inside the club. Right in those photos, a brand new face popped up, a guy named Kane. Kane was later confirmed as one of the gang members who helped kidnap Colin and his family. He was also the robber dubbed the Cop in the security footage. Sadly, before the robbery wrapped up, Murray, Paul, and Kane made a fast getaway. After that, they just vanished into thin air. Even though 3 ringleaders had fled during the investigation, cops stumbled on a huge new clue pointing straight to the inside of the cash depot. Murray had visited an electronics shop to buy a pro-grade micro camera and a tiny audio recorder. He planned to secretly film everything inside the bank vault. But when they tried to pull it off, his clumsy crew botched the setup and accidentally got glue stuck all over the camera lens, making it totally useless. With no other option, they had to drag the gear back to the shop to fix it. After repairing it, the shop owner followed their instructions and rigged the micro camera right onto a belt, perfect for undercover recording. At this point, you have probably figured out the catch, right? Because they needed to record the inside of the vault, they needed someone who could casually stroll in and out of the cash depot. That meant from day one, this heist was an inside job. Honestly, the cops had suspected this since the very early days of the investigation. The robbers had perfectly mapped out the route and the exact clock-out time of the depot manager, Colin. That level of pinpoint precision is absolutely not something an outsider could just guess. So on a specific day of the month, police dragged in 2 depot employees for questioning. Even Colin himself he used to be a major suspect. Honestly, the guy had a ton of red flags. During the bank heist, he actually volunteered to open the main gate. He let the getaway van roll right into the yard. Under strict security protocol, he was only supposed to hold a single vault key. But right then, he had 2 in his pocket. Detectives also found a detailed floor plan of the vault, plus photos of the staff saved on his home computer. To top it off, he had asked the security engineer to delay a routine inspection. But as detectives dug deeper into the crime, every single one of those red flags got explained away. The actual mole, the real mole, was finally dragged into the light. When cops checked Zemia's phone records, they caught him reaching out to another number in a super shady way. Even better, at 2:38 on the morning of the heist, meaning just a few minutes before the thieves geared up to flee the cash depot, Zemia had called that exact number. After running a trace, that burner phone belonged to a guy named Emin, an employee working right inside the bank vault. Turns out, the pair weren't just from the same neighborhood. They actually went to high school together back in the day. Late in 2005, right after Emin took his job at the vault, he completely coincidentally bumped into Zemia again. Zemia quickly dragged him into the heist crew, turning him into a perfect inside man planted right there in the vault. He milked his job for all it was worth, quietly snooping around to learn the shift schedules, tracking Colin's every move, even snapping illicit photos of the floor plan. Emin was busted shortly after. With the inside man exposed, detectives turned their crosshairs back to the 3 criminal masterminds still evading arrest. But where in the world were they hiding out? M fled the country, ditching the United Kingdom just 4 days after the heist. He bounced around a bit before settling down in Morocco. Since M only held a Moroccan passport, and Morocco, they weren't exactly rushing to extradite their own citizens. So in his mind, it was the ultimate safe haven. He and Paul threw down cash to rent a massive villa right in the capital. Living a wildly lavish lifestyle in Morocco, they blew that dirty money on luxury cars, high-end designer gear, and flashy jewelry. They even tossed stacks of cash at their girlfriends for plastic surgery. Plus, they were always hitting the casinos, desperately trying to wash all that stolen cash through high-stakes gambling. But once detectives finally zeroed in on their location, they quickly reached out to Moroccan police, slapping the guys with round-the-clock surveillance. They also made sure to tip off Interpol, scoring a global arrest warrant for the crew. Fast forward to June 25, 2007. Lee Murray, Paul, and two of their buddies rolled up to a local shopping mall. Dozens of Moroccan cops, fully armed in tactical gear, suddenly swarmed them. After a tense little standoff, all four men were cuffed right on the spot. Since they picked up charges for resisting arrest, assaulting an officer, and carrying illegal drugs locally, a Moroccan judge actually sentenced M to 8 months behind bars. The United Kingdom pushed hard for an extradition request, but M slipped right through their fingers. His Moroccan passport protected him from extradition, meaning only Paul got hauled back to the United Kingdom. Now, as for the final robber, still out there on the run, his exact whereabouts remained completely off the grid. Investigators figured he was most likely laying low somewhere out in the West Indies. By 2007, police had locked up a grand total of 36 people connected to this historic heist. But after going through the ringer, quite a few of those suspects were proven completely innocent and walked free. Ultimately, the folks who actually had to face the music, catching some very serious felony charges, boiled down to just a handful of the main players. On June 26, 2007, this robbery that shook the United Kingdom was finally brought to trial at the Central Criminal Court. Down at London's Old Bailey, 8 core defendants stood before the judge, including 7 men, and one single woman taking the stand. Roy, Zmia, Lee, Roger, and Emin were all slammed with conspiracy to rob, kidnapping, and illegal weapons possession. The farm owner, Z, caught heavy charges tied directly to the heist and the kidnapping. That thug, Prez, caught charges for helping launder the stolen cash. Meanwhile, Mel, after a serious talk with her dad and her godfather, managed to negotiate a sweet plea deal. She told prosecutors she would happily take the stand as a star witness for the state. In exchange, they completely wiped every single charge against her. She ended up fully turning on her criminal accomplices, spilling every gritty detail about how she helped the crew craft those fake disguises. As for Paul and M, their wild international situation meant they had to stand trial in a totally separate court case. Fast forward to May 28, 2008. The jury finally read the verdict for Roy, Zmia, Lee, and Roger. Every single one got slapped with a life sentence requiring at least 15 years behind bars. Later on, Zmia actually pulled off a successful appeal. His punishment got knocked down to a flat 30 years in prison. Emin, the inside man for the heist, caught a 20-year prison sentence, though he might see parole after 15. He has to serve at least 10. As for the farm owner, John, the jury bought his story an innocent guy, played by Lee. So, John walked free. Another suspect, Kondo Pret, was also completely acquitted after a brutal 7-month trial in court. As for the other 2 big players in the robbery crew, their lives went down completely different paths. Paul finally pleaded guilty in October 2009, officially confessing to his role in the vault heist. But he swore up and down that he wasn't one of the 7 armed guys who actually stormed the depot. In the end, he caught an 18-year prison sentence. As for Murray, his situation was a whole lot messier. Since he had Moroccan citizenship, his trial actually had to happen locally over in Morocco. British prosecutors shipped the entire case file over to Moroccan authorities. Then, on June 1, 2010, a Moroccan court delivered the verdict. Murray got 10 years behind bars. But later, because the armed robbery was so severe, they cranked his sentence way up to 25 years. On top of that, they seized every single asset he owned in Morocco. The cash from auctioning off his stuff went straight toward paying back the insurance company. And just like that, this world-famous bank heist, at least in the eyes of the law, was finally closed. But the massive aftershocks of the whole thing were far from over. The crime was like a boulder tossed into a quiet river. We are still feeling the ripples of it today. The security firm completely shut down its cash-handling business and sold off the exact vault that got hit. That farm they used to stash the dirty cash, it basically turned into a modern treasure-hunting legend. Crazy rumors started flying that a massive fortune was still buried somewhere deep in the dirt. Thrill seekers swarmed the area, tearing the place apart, looking for the stash. By 2016, 10 years after the heist, around 32 million British pounds of the stolen loot was still completely unaccounted for. That is, roughly 960 billion Vietnamese dong. Police admitted that this massive chunk of cash probably vanished straight into organized crime networks, especially those old unmarked bills. Their serial numbers are basically impossible to trace now. As for the remaining fugitives on the run, police tracked their hideouts all the way to the West Indies and northern Cyprus. But honestly, even if those guys are sitting on the rest of that stolen money, they probably cannot spend a single dime in peace. With a massive high-profile robbery case like this one, police figure underground money laundering fees eat up around 70 to 80%. So in the end, the actual cut that really hits their pockets is basically peanuts. And what about the dark twists of fate for the people sucked straight into this chaos? Their lives were completely destroyed. Mel turned state's evidence and had to totally erase her old identity. Word on the street says the remaining syndicate members slapped a massive £7 million bounty on her. Dead or alive, she will spend the rest of her days hiding in the shadows, constantly looking over her shoulder. Fast forward to 2013, Malcolm, a former manager at the security company, tragically took his own life. His grieving family strongly believes his sudden death was directly tied to the horrific vault robbery. Even though cops never actually found a single shred of criminal evidence against the guy, behind closed doors, they heavily suspect he secretly played an inside role in the depot heist. Eventually, crushed under the psychological weight of the guilt, he chose to end it all. By 2016, Paul finished serving his time. He walked free, hoping for a quiet life. But sadly, he could not outrun his past. In September 2018, someone gunned him down, right on his front porch. He miraculously survived the hit, but his bloody nightmare was just getting started. Jump to July 2019. He got brutally ambushed again, this time right inside his kitchen. He caught 2 bullets point blank, had a finger sliced off, and 1 round tore straight through his throat. It lodged deep into his spine, leaving him totally paralyzed from the chest down. Now, he is stuck in a wheelchair for life. The 3 hitmen who attacked him finally got caught. In April 2025, they caught heavy prison sentences ranging from 30 to 36 years. As for the motive, people are split. But one thing is crystal clear. It all leads back to that massive vault robbery. Chances are, someone out there was terrified he would spill dirty secrets meant to stay buried forever. As for Zmija, after serving years of hard time, he finally walked free in 2020 and got deported to Albania. But soon enough, he was back in action. Throwing a huge public wedding, showing off a massive mansion, and bragging about their honeymoon online. The public was furious. People naturally assumed he still had the key to all that missing cash. This famous global heist crossed the line. way past ordinary crime. It turned into a deep social scar that refuses to fade. Back in 2009, journalist Howard dropped a book breaking this whole case down. It told the real story behind the biggest cash heist ever, piecing together exactly what happened. Then, in 2023, a 4-part true crime documentary called Catching Lightning came out. It dragged this famous bank job straight back into the public eye, making us look back at such a carefully planned and totally reckless heist. But their payoff wasn't freedom. They got decades in prison, permanent physical damage, along with constant paranoia and completely wrecked lives. Because when sheer greed completely destroys your reason, the urge for fast cash just swallows you whole. This is probably the absolute harshest, most brutal warning that this whole robbery left for the world to see. Anyway, that wraps today's video. Catch you guys later in the next one. Bye for now.